1975 to 2025. By my jitterbug calculator, that's 50 years. Why stop now? I don't think he's going to. Danny Hooper has agreed to be my guest today.
Reluctantly.
This podcast brought to you by homegirls.ca, a top producing team at Remax Professionals, and thompsonmortgages.com. They take care of the financials. You search for your perfect home. The combination of these two sponsors has helped me facilitate multiple real estate transactions, including my most recent move right here in 2025. Now here's today's show.
Reluctantly.
Danny, good to see you.
Good to see you too, pal. How you doing? You cleaned up good. You're looking good. You're a handsome man. You went through that dark period there for about 25 years, the dope years or whatever the heck you were doing, and long hair and that jagged, ragged, just crawled out of bed look. But this is better. You've cleaned up good.
Right. I think that's what I'm going to call the first half of my biography, the dope years.
You betcha. How you been doing?
Doing very well. Actually, I just returned from vacation out in BC, out in Shuswap. So fresh and ready to go, as you can tell by my unbridled enthusiasm. Well, and you've just finished a long run of stuff with the BVJ that wrapped up, and then the Glenn Anderson thing over the weekend.
Oh my God, yeah, it's been super busy. You know, I learned many years ago. You know, my career started back in 1975. Won a recording contract with CFCW Radio's first ever country star search at Klondike Days, which the contest was in Bonanza Park there, in between the log sawing competition and the Kubassaw eating contest, and won a recording contract. That's kind of what things got going, or when things got going for him.
To get those two events mixed up.
No, absolutely you don't. No, yeah.
Kubassaw sawing competition. Eating.
Kubassaw choking competition. We had some of those out there too. But anyway, so I was living in Tomahawk at the time. I grew up on a cattle ranch, born in Edmonton, but we moved out to a cattle ranch in Tomahawk, and that's kind of where I grew up. And so my career started in country music. In late 1979, my dad and I opened a country nightclub club in Edmonton called Danny Hooper's Stockyard. And it was a steakhouse and country music showroom. At the time, we were the only game in town. This is pre-Cook County years. Shortly after we opened, a movie called The Urban Cowboy came out with John Travolta. So overnight, everybody was into country music. And we had a pretty good run there for a few years, but eventually went broke in the nightclub in 1986. And I realized I had to diversify my career. So got an auctioneer's license and started to drill down doing strictly fundraising auctions. That's the only kind of auction I've ever done in all these years. I've never done a farm sale or an auto auction or anything like that. I focus strictly on fundraising, and also started to branch out into MC work, you know, doing master of ceremonies work at corporate events and everything from weddings to whatever. So yeah, diversified. And so today, yeah, we've got a really busy career. It's 50 years in, and the last run was really busy. I did the Vermilion Fair Grandstand show, and that's probably the best ag fair anywhere in Canada, the Vermilion Fair. And that was a week before we rolled into Big Valley Jamboree. And this was my 30th year emceeing the main stage, Terry. So that was quite an honor. And as of the Sunday night of Big Valley Jamboree, I'd introduced a total of 540 acts on that main stage in 30 years at BVJ. So that's been a pretty cool experience. And then went straight down to Red Deer for the Oilers Flames alumni golf tournament. They call that the Battle of Alberta. That was 2 days of MC work and auctioneering. And then Glenn Anderson's thing last Thursday night. So it was good.
Didn't you just do a performance on the weekend as well?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're playing out in Buck Creek. I still do some music. I do probably a dozen events a year and stuff. So this was an evening of classic country music. Actually, I've done more events this year than I have the past few years, this being my 50th anniversary, when we wanted to get out and do some interesting things. So back in June, the first week of June, it was Seniors Week in Canada. And my wife, Barb, she said, you know what? She said, a lot of your original fans that were with you when you started in 1975, you know, when I started, I was 18 years old. And my average fan at that time was about 40 years of age. So Barb pointed out to me, she said, a lot of those original fans are sitting in the seniors' homes and seniors' lodges. So she said, why don't you go out and entertain them? For the first week of June, during Seniors Week, we traveled around in our motorhome and entertained at 16 different seniors' homes and senior lodges in 15 towns in 5 days. So So I add those performances to the total this year. It's a busier year for sure, but that was very cool. Of all the things, honest to God, of all the things I've done in my 50-year career, that was the single most rewarding thing I've ever done, was going out and playing for those seniors. It was a cool experience.
I can't imagine how it would have been, you just pop into a lodge or whatever the case may be. They often will have those communal rooms where everybody kind of gathers away from their accommodations and that kind of thing. And,
Mhm.
every once in a while you see those videos where they're all, clapping and stuff, and the
I know.
appreciation is there. I can't imagine how bright a spot in their day that would have been.
Well, you know what? It was a real transformational week for me because, and I'm happy to say, and I've been working hard at shedding the ego, over the past few years. I'd say ever since my wife Barb and I got together, she's been a huge influence on my life, and we got together 7 years ago. We just celebrated our 5th anniversary, and she's just got me really grounded. I've been able to shed a lot of that ego shit that got in the way for many, many years, thinking I was a much bigger deal than what I ever was. And I never wanted to be that guy, seniors lodges would call and ask me to go out and do a performance. And I did not want to be that guy that goes and sits there with, singing those old songs for the old people. But I did the big turnaround, and it was absolutely amazing. And going into those homes, we didn't know what to expect. We were doing 3 a day. So we'd do a morning performance in one town. We'd go to another town for the afternoon performance, and then a third town for the evening performance. And I didn't know what to expect, what condition folks were going to be in and whether they'd enjoy it. But I'd say 85% of the people were really with it. It was amazing. And, the 15% that were suffering from Alzheimer's or dementia, when you sing those old songs like the old Marty Robbins El Paso or Folsom Present Blues or Hank Snow song, you could see these people, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them would kind of perk up and light up, and the lips would be moving along. They'd be kind of singing along. It just showed me how powerful that music is, and it does get through to people.
A lot of times, something like that can be much more rewarding than playing a stage of, on 25 in front of 25,000 people or something like that. I just, you brought up the ego aspect of it, and being in the public eye, being an entertainer, being a radio personality, being a music personality, and that sort of thing ends up rearing its ugly head to a certain degree. You have to have an ego to be in the business, but at the same time, keeping it in check and have somebody being able to rein you in a little bit is an opportunity, or at least something that provides you with an opportunity to have a little more appreciation for what you can get back by giving.
Absolutely. Today my mantra is SFP, and that stands for simple, fun, and profitable. And, as with you, both of us being in the entertainment business, there's lots of demands on our time and lots of requests coming in all the time for different things. And that's how we measure what we're going to get involved in and what we don't get involved in. And it's simple, fun, and profitable. And profitable doesn't just mean money, and more times than not, it has nothing to do with money. It's profitable, just like the seniors tour was. It was just so enriching for the soul. And it's just such a, I'm 68 going on 69 years old. And it was a pretty clear reminder of, where we're all headed, as we start to age, and just kind of it was a good grounding exercise for me. So, and, things, that's why I'm not touring anymore with the big band and spending a lot of time on the road. The S part, the simple, that's just not simple. You got to hire the audio contractors, and you get the band together, and the rehearsals and the travel and the hotels and all the rest of it. So, if it's not fairly simple, I don't want to get involved in it anymore. And if it's not fun, I don't even touch it. So, yeah. SFP, simple, fun, and profit. I've learned some good lessons in my life. Some of them I've come up with just from my own thinking. One of those is that you don't have to own it to enjoy it. When I look back through my life, all the stuff that I spent money on that I thought would bring me joy and pleasure and enjoyment and whatnot, it was just a big waste of money, and through the years, I spent money on all the toys, typical Alberta kind of guy.
Yeah.
You don't have to own it to enjoy it. Now, my wife and I, we travel all around the world, but we're not fancy hotel people. We're not fancy people, and we just love Airbnbs. And, another thing I've realized now, I don't want to be repeating the same old experiences every year. So, as far as owning a timeshare, things like that, going back to the same place every year has no appeal. We like to get out and experience different things. And so another good lesson I learned, my uncle taught me. He said, for every mile of straight highway, remember there's 2 miles of ditch. That one is worth remembering.
I like that too. I'm gonna write that down. The little ditch ditty. I like that. That's a beauty. The simple, fun, profitable aspect. I got 2 of those. I
What
got
is
the
that?
simple. I'm pretty simple, and
Yeah.
I've been accused of being a lot of fun.
You are? Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah. It's not profitable.
I haven't turned it into a fortune by any stretch, but that's
No.
for sure. So, you kinda ran right off the top, you kinda ran through everything like a Coles Notes sort of thing, 1975 to this past weekend. But, let's go I mean, I can remember kinda, roasting you, giving you, the little elbow on the air, especially when you were working at CFCW across the hall from us, saying that, if you ever shake Danny Hooper's hand, it's the smoothest hand you'll ever shake because he hasn't done a day of work in his life. I always remember giving you ribs on that. But I do remember you have smooth hands.
Well, do you know what, buddy? And I accept that. I grew up on the ranch in Tomahawk, and I was forced off the farm by my dad because I'm not handy. I'm the least handy guy in the world. I mean, I can't if I pick up a flashlight and it doesn't turn on, I don't even know where to start. I mean, and I get nervous changing batteries in a flashlight. If I'd have stayed on the farm or the ranch, I'd be walking around right now. I'd be missing an arm, or I'd have electrocuted myself, or something really bad would have happened. And when you're not handy on a farm or ranch, you need to get off it because you're a liability to yourself and everybody around you. So you got 2 choices. If you can't farm or ranch and you got to leave, you either the NHL or country music. That's your 2 choices. And I wasn't a hockey player. I found that out when I was about 8 years old. I tried to play on the team in Tomahawk. We had 6 guys on the team. 5 would show up for a typical game, and our coach was a piss tank, sat on the bench eating pickled eggs and drinking beer. And our goalie was a kid in a wheelchair with a goalie mask that we made out of a tinfoil pie plate with eyes cut out of it, duct taped on his head. So the Indian kids from Duffield come down and they'd have something to shoot at. Played them every second weekend, and every other weekend it was the rich kids from Drayton Valley. And it was we were called the Tomahawky Boys, our team. So it was horrible. I just had a bad experience. I was not an athlete. I was that kid that was the last kid picked for every sport team and the first kid to get a dodgeball in the face, even when we weren't playing dodgeball. So that was me.
You'd have been the kid that I was aiming at all the time.
Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah, you're a hockey player. Yeah, I was that kid. So, and that's the thing. That's one of the nice, I don't know how you feel about aging, but I'm having the best time of my life. I really am. And I'm really embracing the aging process. And I'm fascinated, watching people that are a decade older than me that are in the entertainment business or 20 years ahead of me in the entertainment business, seeing how they're navigating all of it, as your popularity starts to wane, and how do you stay relevant, and culture is shifting so fast right now. Society's changing quickly, and just how do you stay on top of the wave, ahead of the wave. And so, yeah, it's a fascinating process. But, my wife, she asked me to go up on the roof and clean some leaves out of the gutter last October. And I finally, as part of my process aging, I'm getting more honest with myself and with her. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And she said, well, what do you mean? No. And I said, I'm not going up on the roof because I'm not handy. She said, well, you've been acting handy for the few years we've been together here. And I said, well, I was just courting. So anyway, I said, I'm not going up there. I said, I'll hire somebody to do it. There's people that do that and like doing it and they're good at it, but I'm not going to climb a ladder and do that because I'm just not handy. She said, I forgot, you're Danny Hooper. And she never talked to me like, oh, I forgot. It was like she hit me on the end of the nose. My eyes were watering. I didn't know what to say. So I thought about it for a second. I said, yeah, you know what, Barbie, I am Danny Hooper. And if you Google me, you will not see a single picture of me holding any kind of a tool. I'm holding a guitar or a microphone, not a tool. She said, well, you told me you were handy when we met. I said, well, you told me like moose hunting, and that was bullshit.
We actually have a connection, do we not? Through my wife's uncle is Barbie's brother. Is that not the case?
Yeah, you mentioned that at the golf tournament we were at last year. And so you're saying that her brother, what? Anyway, we're related. Well, come on over for Thanksgiving. You're because she's Ukrainian, and if you're related, you're here. There's like 400 people here on Thanksgiving. And it's funny being Ukrainian, being Ukrainian. Those Ukrainians, they get in what I call these Yuki feuds, and they fight with people in the family. They don't even know why they're fighting. And so there's certain people that come over at Thanksgiving or Christmas that we don't talk to. We just don't talk because we're mad at them because of something Baba did 25 years ago, 30 years ago, something she said about somebody at a wedding or whatever. So yeah, it's the craziest thing.
Speaking of Christmas, your Christmas song, the
Little Log Cabin.
Yeah, Little Log Cabin.
Yeah, how do you know about that?
Because I'm a professional interviewer and I did my research. So the little log cabin,
Yeah.
the video for that made me laugh out loud, and not because of I wouldn't. I'm not poking fun at the song or anything. It's good quality Christmas song, but the thing that made me laugh was at the 155 mark of that song. There is a shot of you in the band, and you are taller than everyone in the band. And I call bullshit on that.
Well, that's why, when I decided to get into country music, the reason I got into country music is you can wear cowboy boots and a hat, which will add 8 inches to you, overall. So, yeah, no, I'm just short little guy. So, yeah, that was a trick shot.
Yeah, and it's not just your
55,
cowboy.
I gotta watch that.
It's not just your cowboy boots and a hat. You are standing up, and your belt buckle is like at the collarbone of your
I'll
slide
have to
guitar
watch that.
player.
155. Is that AM or PM?
No, the 155 minute of the. I wasn't watching it in the middle of the night.
Okay. Hey, speaking of buckles, and it's going to look like we set this up, but we did. But I had this ready because I just wanted to show it to everybody. This is my new buckle, Terry. You probably haven't seen that. My wife had this made for me for my 50th anniversary. Look at this. Isn't that a thing of beauty?
That is
75
nice.
to 2025. So she had that made by a guy named Troy Fisher. He's originally from Wildwood, Alberta here, and he lives in Texas now, and he makes buckles for George Strait.
Really?
Yeah, really. Yep.
Does he
Alberta
also
boy.
make them for National Finals Rodeo or Canadian
That's right.
Finals?
Yeah, does them for National Finals Rodeo, Canadian Finals Rodeo, and stuff. So yeah, that's quite a treasure. That is.
Reluctantly.
This podcast is reluctantly sponsored by the real estate team of homegirls.ca, a top producing team at RE/MAX Professionals. If you are buying or selling in the Edmonton region, Shauna and Bonnie can handle everything with strong industry connections to mortgage brokers, home inspectors, lawyers, and contractors to support every step of the process. The market is very active right now. We recently listed our home again, and it went from MLS to closing conditions in 8 days. Now, of course, results may vary from property to property, but Shauna and Bonnie have been our trusted real estate advisors through buying and selling no less than 7 properties. I've recommended them to many friends who want real, relatable people with a personalized, hands-on approach. New home, investment, recreational, even commercial properties. Homegirls.ca is the website. Email info is right there. And the phone number is 780-517-HOME.
Reluctantly.
The mention of the nightclub, you talked briefly about some of the music stars as they age and, 20 years beyond where you are in your career. So, they're at 50 years in, they're at 70 years in, or whatever the case might be. And you mentioned a couple of people. Going back to the nightclub, Danny Hooper's Stockyard. First of all, why wasn't it called Don Hooper's Stockyard? Didn't your old man have a heavy hand in it?
Well, we were equal partners, which means neither of us had any money. Which is the truth. We were on the ranch in Tomahawk. I'd been out on the road. I won that recording contract in that talent contest in 1975. The album was recorded during my, I was going down to Camrose Lutheran College. I was going to be a lawyer is what I wanted to do. I was going to get into aviation law. I've always enjoyed flying. I've had a pilot's license since 1977 or 78 and wanted to work for the airlines in their legal department. So anyway, I'm down in taking my Bachelor of Commerce. And during my second year at college, the album came out. And before I knew it, I was nominated, got a Juno nomination for Best New Male Vocalist against Burton Cummings that year. You can Google that, 1976. And he'd left the Guess Who and went out as a solo act. So, of course, he got the award, but it was just kind of cool being nominated with him. And yeah, I had a couple of songs that were starting to roll on the charts across Canada and that. And I'm sitting in school. So I said to my dad, I said, gosh, I said, this music business looks pretty easy. I said, I'd like to give it a shot. He said, well, I'll manage you and do your bookings for you from the farm in Tomahawk there. And you get out on the road and work hard and we'll give it a couple of years and see how it goes. If it doesn't work out, he said, promise you'll go back to school. And I said, no problem. You won't have to twist my arm. So, We did. That's exactly what we did. In 1977, 8, 79, I was on the road an average of 48 or 49 weeks a year, working mostly Western Canada. But you remember, Terry, back in the day, every little town had a hotel that had a bar that had entertainment, live entertainment 6 nights a week. So you could make a living as a road musician back then. And, we'd leave Edmonton. I'd play Vegreville, Vermilion, Provost, Lloydminster, Meadow Lake, Prince Albert, North Battleford, Saskatoon, Regina, Swift Current, Tabor, Brooks, Lethbridge, and then Calgary, and come back. Well, that'd be 4 months. You'd be gone on that tour, and then you'd swing and go up north and come down through the interior of BC, and that'd be another 4 months. So we did that for three and a half years, and I was just burned out. And I said to Dad, I said, we're playing some pretty cool clubs in these cities. There was the Bar K in Saskatoon, the Pump in Regina, and the famous Ranchments in Calgary, which is still in business. I said, Edmonton doesn't have a nightclub. Why don't we open one? So the story is, and the truth is, that we borrowed money from my aunt and uncle. My aunt loaned me the money we needed to open. My uncle loaned Dad the money he needed, and we were equal partners in that. And we opened up, and that's how we got started. And how it finished was we were actually leasing the property. It was in an old church downtown, 96th Street and 106th Avenue. It was an old German Baptist church that probably 7 or 8 years before we came along had been converted to a restaurant, and it went broke a number of times before we finally showed up. And we leased it from a fella who had been running a nightclub in there called the Mayflower. And he leased it to us, everything, dishes, cutlery, everything. It was lock, stock, and barrel, $4,000 a month. And so we signed the lease, and we opened the doors, and a year into it, Urban Cowboy is out, we're packed. And one night a realtor came into the nightclub with some clients on a Friday night. We're jammed. And I said, this guy's in a suit and tie, and everybody in the place is wearing jeans. I said, who are you and what are you doing? He said, well, I'm so-and-so with Royal LePage. I'm just showing your property. And I said, well, why? He said, well, because you're for sale. You're in the commercial catalog here. And I said, it's not for sale. And he showed me the MLS book, and here it was, Danny Hooper Stockyard. And so I ran downstairs to the office. I phoned the landlord right away. His name was Willie. And I said, Willie, I said, there's a realtor here. I said, what's going on? He said, oh, I've been meaning to call you. So I said, well, save you a dime. I said, what's going on? And he said, the building's in foreclosure. And I said, what do you mean? How can that be? I said, we haven't been a minute late on rent. We've been paying our rent. He said, but I haven't been paying the mortgage. So he'd been taking our $4,000 a month, putting it in his pocket, and the place was being foreclosed on. So the Monday morning, Dad and I went to talk to our bank, and they laughed us out the front door. And we went up and down Jasper Avenue, talked to every commercial lender, and we just got laughed out of everybody's front door. We'd only been in business a year. It's an old church. We're running a bar in there, and it didn't matter how much money we were making. And the truth is, we're probably stealing half the money out of it anyway, and so the financials didn't look good. So we ended up going to what they call non-conventional lenders. And we signed a $400,000 mortgage. That's how much we needed, a $400,000 mortgage at prime plus 9. So April 1982, prime in Canada hit 21.9%. We're paying 30% interest on a $400,000 mortgage. You're laughing. Yeah, we weren't laughing at the time. It was $120,000 a year in interest, and we're selling a rum and Coke for $1.75. So, and a beer, I think, was $1.10 or $1.25. So, we finally went broke and closed the doors in 1986, but I do say that we actually went broke in 1982. We just didn't realize it till 1986. That's more like the truth. So, so we folded, and it was just, but it was meant to be. It was just part of my journey in life. And I do believe that God has a plan for everybody. And that was part of the plan. And I learned a lot, in that business. And it's amazing the impact that the Stockyard had on people, because as I travel now, Terry, even down to the States to work from time to time, invariably somebody comes up that has a Danny Hooper Stockyard memory. It's amazing how many people went through that little place in the 6 years that we were open. But yeah, it's a misconception. Everybody thinks it was Dad's club. We were equal partners. My name was on it because I was an entertainer. But it's funny, we came in and we put Danny Hooper Stockyard, the sign up, and we had people come in, had no clue who Danny Hooper was. Because I rarely played Edmonton. I'd been on the road for 4 years, playing out all the small towns and playing Western Canada. So we came in, a lot of people thought we'd moved up from the States, or they didn't have a clue who I was, a lot of them. So, but anyway, we got going, and the rest is history.
I would imagine people had memories of seeing Freddie Fender or Waylon Jennings.
Man, we had Merle Haggard played there. Once we got up and rolling and we're starting to make some money, we started to take a chance on bringing some of these Nashville Grand Ole Opry stars in.
Yeah.
And
Did you have Waylon Jennings come up
Waylon
or
did not play there. No, no, no.
Johnny Paycheck?
Johnny Paycheck played
Right.
there.
Tammy Wynette?
Merle Haggard, Tammy Wynette, Ray Price, Freddie Fender, Ferlin Husky, Gene Watson, little Jimmy Dickens, Asleep at the Wheel. Ian Tyson played there a few times. He was probably in there about 4 times. So, yeah, we had lots of big acts come in. And the first guy we had was Leroy Van Dyke, the guy that had the Auctioneer song. And I've got a copy of the old ticket hanging on my wall here to that dinner show. It was prime rib dinner, included, I think, 2 drinks and the Leroy Van Dyke show, and the tickets were $20 a piece. So that was 1980, 81 when we brought him in. And we had Johnny Lee, the guy that had the song Looking for Love off the Urban Cowboy, and Bobby Bear, and lots of big stars. So, that was really impactful on my career and my life to be, at the time, I was probably 22 years old when we got the Stockyard going, and we got all these big stars who, coming in to work at our place, and to be able to rub shoulders with all of these stars, it was amazing. But, without exception, Terry, and my dad was smart, he pointed this out to me. He said, why do you think guys like Ray Price are driving all the way from Texas up here to play a 300-seat bar in the middle of February, or Merle Haggard, all these guys? And invariably, well, I'd say not invariably, but probably 80, 90% is because they're messed up with booze or alcohol or financial problems, mismanagement of their money through their careers, entrusting shady management. I mean, that was classic back in those days, the 50s, 60s, 70s. These stars were taken advantage of, and the business had not yet developed to the point where it was as sophisticated as it is now, and protective more so of the artists. So, yeah, so these people were out there. Tammy Wynette, it was sad. She's coming in and she just needs the money. And if you knew what we were paying these people, it was not a lot. We were getting Merle Haggard, I think, probably for 20 grand. So, and he's driving all that way, 2 big buses and a big band and all the rest of it. So even then he wasn't making a lot of bucks.
And then when you're not having the big names like a Ferlin Husky or Freddie Fender or whoever it might be, then you're trying to fill it with local acts. And back then, local acts are making the same as what local acts are making today.
Well,
40 years later, they're still.
And you're a player, that, it's almost embarrassing to admit that I was paying my side guys back then. In 1980, I had a couple of real hot shots in my band. One was Calvin Vollrath, who went on to be the North American Grand Old Time Fiddle Champion. I don't know how many times he's recorded 70 some albums. He's a legend in the fiddle world. I had him in my band at the same time that I had a guy named Red Volkart. And Red was just a monster guitar player. He's not a very tall guy. He's just as wide as he was tall, and his fingers were as thick as sausage, as bratwurst, not the breakfast sausages, the skinny breakfast sausage, the fat, stubby little bratwurst. And this guy could play Telecaster like nobody ever saw. When we went broke at the Stockyard in 1986, Red said, I think I'm going to move down to California, Redding, California, and hang around Redding, see if I can get hired on with Merle Haggard. And we all laughed. We all said, yeah, sure you are. And a couple of years later, by God, I'm watching Nashville Network on TV one night, Grand Ole Opry, Merle Haggard, and there's Red standing on stage, and he became one of Merle Haggard's strangers and played with Merle for about 6.5 years. So became one of the most successful Telecaster guitar players and record producers and stuff. He's still in business down in Austin. He produced my albums for me and stuff. So yeah, I had some real hot musicians. But back to what we were talking about, I was paying those guys, my band back in 1980, 81, 82, more money for a one-nighter than what you can hire guys for today. It's like unreal.
It's criminal is what it is.
It is, yeah. Now, I don't know why the music business has not kept pace. It's just, I don't know.
Yeah, because I think back to it now. I mean, my son is going to be 28 in November, and he's playing, professional music and trying to slug away and make a living, and it's near impossible. And he's one of the lucky ones. He's been able to travel the world and tour some pretty big places, playing Lollapalooza and Coachella and India, Dubai, and some Europe and Great Britain and all kinds of stuff. There's people who would give their left nut to be in his seat right now, but he's tried to make a living at it. It's near impossible.
Yeah, well, that's why when we closed the Stockyard, I knew I couldn't go back to the music business and make a living, especially now that the source of my livelihood had been closed down. So that's when I decided to diversify and get the auctioneer's license. I look back at my core skills and, as an entertainer, as with you or anybody in the entertainment business, you have a personality. You're generally quick on your feet and stuff. And so it was actually that uncle that loaned us the money to get into the Stockyard that was the one that He was an auctioneer, and I went out, helped him one night at a Ducks Unlimited auction, and just emceeing and doing some entertainment, a little bit of comedy stuff while he was doing the auction. And then he asked me to auction off one of these Ducks Unlimited prints, and I sold the thing for a whole bunch of money just because I was goofing around. I didn't know what I was doing, but I had people laughing and sold the print for 3 or 4 times more than what they'd been selling for that night. So he took me aside. He said, you know what? He said, you should really think about getting your auctioneer's license and focusing strictly on this kind of stuff, on fundraising auctions. And it was great advice. Back then, nobody was charging. And really, it's almost that you weren't allowed to charge for a fundraising auction if you were an auctioneer. I went to the Western College of Auctioneering down in Billings, Montana to get licensed. And down there, they teach you, you're expected to give your time back to the community and do those charity auctions for free. But Uncle Wes, he said that you could probably build a business out of this. He said, I think there's a future in fundraising auctioneering. And by gosh, was he ever right? I know I was the first in the area here to start charging $500 to do an auction, and it just kept building and building and building. And nowadays, I work with my biggest client is the National Football League, and I've worked with the David Foster Foundation for years, and lots of Rotary clubs and hospital foundations, and still little school groups and little sport teams and things like that. So the whole gamut. But it is a very viable business for sure. And today it's an accredited specialty within the auction industry. You can go and get a special accreditation through the National Auctioneers Association, benefit auctioneer specialist. And I've got that designation.
We talked briefly about the performance aspect, the nightclub, and then now the transitioned into the auction part of it. But there are a couple of things that we kind of skipped over, but I think they deserve a little more attention. And that's the Juno nomination where you lost to Burton Cummings.
Yeah.
In 1976.
I can't believe it either.
Was it 1976?
76, yeah, you could Google it. I think it was the 1976 Junos, and it was for Best New Male Vocalist. So it was kind of laughable that he came into that category, but the Guess Who had broken up, and he was out as a solo act and stuff. Not that it matters. I didn't have a chance anyway. I'm sure I did. I don't know who else was on the ballot, but it was laughable that I would have been nominated that early in my career for a Juno nomination. I think the Junos just had, clearly were just kind of getting going, and they were looking for people.
It's a great story, though.
It is a great story. Yeah, it's a great story.
And before you hung it up, hung it up because you didn't really hung it up. You still performed this past weekend, but you recorded 11 albums and you got to perform at the Grand Ole Opry.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I did that in that would be 1980. So we've opened the Stockyard, and we're starting to make connections with a lot of these Nashville artists that we're trying to get booked into the club. And to give you a little bit of background, some context, my dad had experience in the promotion business. He and a fellow named Curly Gerlach. Do you remember that name?
I recall that. Yeah.
Curly Gerlach was the original morning guy, I think, or certainly one of the original morning guys on CFCW back in the CFCW got going, I think, 1958, if I'm not mistaken. So by 1960, early 60s, Curly Gerlach is the morning guy, and very, very popular back then. And he and my dad were buddies, so they partnered up and formed a promotion company. And the two of them, along with a fella down in Calgary who was the Decca Records rep, his name was Arnold Palmer, and another guy named morning DJ at the country station in Calgary, Scotty, I can't remember his last name. So the four guys,
Scheffler?
They set up this, huh?
Arnold Palmer, was it Scotty Scheffler?
Well, not the golfer. Yeah. If you saw the Arnold Palmer that was the Decca rep, he doesn't look anything like Arnold Palmer, the golfer. Doesn't look like any kind of a golfer. So these four guys set up a promotion company, and they start bringing all those Grand Ole Opry acts into the Edmonton Gardens here. So I've got pictures of Dad with Webb Pierce and Johnny Cash. I've got a picture right here in my room of Johnny Cash before he started dressing. He's wearing a white shirt, before he became the Man in Black. So he's just getting his career going. So Dad had a background in the promotion business. He had some connections already in Nashville and stuff that he had maintained through the years, some friendships and things like that.
Reluctantly.
This podcast reluctantly sponsored by ThompsonMortgages.com. Not limited to just mortgages. They also provide insurance. Almost any service associated with a home or building purchase can be done in-house. And for anything beyond that, they have an extensive network of professionals at their fingertips. Consolidations, loans, mortgages, legal services, accounting services, financial planning, insurance. They are your one-stop shop. How do I know this? Well, Mike at ThompsonMortgages.com has helped us out with our mortgages for the last few real estate transactions that we have made. You can be confident that they will work hard to ensure all your mortgage and insurance goals are fulfilled. Check them out for yourself. ThompsonMortgages.com.
Reluctantly.
The performances at the Opry, was there 4 of them that you did 4 times?
No, I only played the Opry once. Yeah, I'm sorry, I got
Oh,
sidetracked there. This was 1980. So Dad was he was just a hustler, a great promoter, and always promoting me. He was my biggest fan. So he said, we got to get you on the Grand Ole Opry. That'd be good. So he's calling his friends down in Nashville there. And we decided I was going to go down and record my 3rd album. Done the first 2 in Canada, but we were going to do the 3rd one in Nashville. So we went to a studio called Fireside Studios that was owned by Porter Wagner and Dolly Parton. On the Thursday of the week that I was recording my album, we're just listening to some tracks, and Porter Wagner came into the studio. He was in and out of there every day. Never did see Dolly Parton. I've never met her. But on the Thursday, he's listening to some mixes, and he said, you sound pretty good. He said, how'd you like to come on to the Grand Ole Opry on Saturday night? He said, I'm the MC this weekend. So I said, oh my gosh. So it was very cool. Got to go and perform on the Opry, but it was the coolest thing about that whole experience. And the memory I have that's most vivid was that you've heard of Roy Acuff. Roy Acuff was the godfather of the Grand Ole Opry, and he was the godfather. And he had an office at the end of a hallway back behind the stage. And anybody that came into the Opry had to get his blessing before you could go onto that stage and sing, which meant that Porter had to take me back, introduce me to Roy Acuff, sitting behind his desk smoking, and he had to meet me and interview me and find out what kind of family I had and where I was from, and just to talk to me for a few minutes. And he said, yeah, you're okay, you can go perform. But he was the guy, the godfather. So that was a pretty cool experience. But I got to play the Opry in 1980.
Do you remember?
Brett Kissel will tell you he's the first Canadian to ever play the Opry. That's not accurate.
Brett Kissel's full of shit. Do you remember who else played that day, before, after? Was there a headliner, or was it?
I don't, Terry. And you know what? I did try once. I probably didn't try hard enough, but I tried to get in touch with the archives at the Opry, because I'd love to know what that exact date was and know who else was on the bill. But it was so exciting for me. I think I was just my own little bubble. And no, I can't remember who else played, but I'd like to know who the musicians were in the band that night. And you're on such an adrenaline rush. You're walking out on that stage. It's just kind of like surreal. But I only did it the one time, but it was very, very cool. And I've got that shirt hanging right up there. That's the shirt I wore on the Grand Ole Opry 1980. And I've got a picture somewhere. I got to dig it out. But I've got an old photograph of Porter Wagner reaching in front of the WSM microphone stand, shaking my hand. I'm coming on in that shirt to sing. He's just introduced me. But yeah, I got to get in touch with dig a little deeper with the Opry, because they've certainly got to have those records.
At that time, you just go up, do what, 1, 2, 3 songs?
I did 2. Yeah, and it helped that one of the songs on the album that I was recording in Nashville was called, I can't remember what the title was, but it was a Porter tune, and that's the one he came in when we were mixing that day. And so I think it was just a little appreciation that we're doing one of his songs that he invited me on. But
what do you think of country music now?
All music is good. I mean, I think it's like every genre of music has become fractured into so many subsets. But, I'm seeing Big Valley Jamboree. I've got to be honest, every year when they bring me back to MC, sometimes I have to Google a third of the acts, because the industry has changed. And this too, from, being in the business. Back in the day, when I was starting my career in the 70s, some of these stars like that we had at the Stockyard, like Leroy Van Dyke, he only had 2 hits in his career. He had the Auctioneer song, and he had Walk On By. And a lot of those guys only had 1 or 2 big hits, but they could make an entire 40-year career out of 2 hits. Well, nowadays, if these guys aren't churning out at least 3 singles a year, and if they're not getting the streams, they're gone. I look at the list of 540 acts I've introduced at Big Valley Jamboree, and probably a good third of them came and went in a flash. I could tell you names that nobody would remember. So what do I think of it? Some of it I like, some of it is not my taste, but there's good in all genres. I'm not one of these old farts that sits back and says, it's not country anymore. You can't call that country. Well, yeah, you can call it country. It's just a different kind of country.
Where's the fiddle? I don't hear a fiddle.
I don't hear fiddle. I can't understand what he's saying. One of the things I don't like about country music these days is the thematics of it. That so many of the songs are so redundant. They're about sitting on the back of a pickup truck, drinking whiskey with a girl in a field down a dirt road. I mean, that gets pretty old pretty quick, you know. And one of the nice things about the classic country music, and I still perform a lot. When I do perform, I do a lot of the old Marty Robbins, a lot of that old stuff. Those songs told stories. You know, they were imaginative. There was some work that went into the songwriting. And I'm not saying these guys don't work at writing songs now, but lots of times these hits are driven more about the hooks in the instrumentation and the choruses and things like that. So I don't hear a lot of real creativity and originality in a lot of the lyrics in today's country music.
You still perform when you perform. You still have the songs where you can, and well, you can drop it down and come back, and you can, yeah, just because you can come up and there's always that thing,
Oh yeah.
looking back Texas, and
Hey, those are great songs, Lugenbach,
yeah,
Texas. That's a great song. Great story, great story, great theme to that song. My song, the John Deere Tractor Keys, as a songwriter, one of the real challenges we face in country music is that, and one of the things I hear so much from people, a couple of things, what they like about country music, the older fans, they say, the older country music, we could understand the words, and the songs often told great stories. And the only hit I ever really had was the John Deere Tractor Keys. That came out in 1995. So I'm kind of in between hits right now. Uh,
yeah.
but that song told a great story. A young kid growing up on the farm and realizes that's not for him, and he wants to leave. And mom and dad die and pass away, and the farm's gone. And then the kid regrets it and can't ever go back. So um, somebody once said to me, when you're writing a song, country song, trying to create a story or tell a story in a song in 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes, think about, would it make a good movie? Could you make a movie out of it? So that's kind of been one of my guiding things when I'm writing a song that's telling a story, like a Grandpa's Mandolin that I wrote, or He's Buying Roses Again, or some of the tunes I've had out.
Maybe you just have to go back to the bop 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 bop
Yeah.
mow mow. You do
Yeah.
something like that. That's easier to understand.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Where's your bop a mow mow song, Danny?
Papa Mau Mau. Yeah. Give me one of those. Give me one of those. Yeah, absolutely. Straight to the bank.
It's interesting. I talk about classic rock, and we just lost Ozzy Osbourne.
Yeah.
And we just lost one of the guys from Derek and the Dominoes, Clapton's band with Greg Allman or Dwayne Allman. And I think that there has never been more interest in classic rock as there is right now, because we're starting to lose those people who made that music that was some of the most influential music in rock and roll. It's the same sort of thing with country. You're starting to look at, every once in a while you hear somebody from Alabama died, or somebody from the Oak Ridge Boys died, or, Dolly's husband, Carl Dean, who we didn't really know much about, he passed away. And, you start hearing about stuff. Oh, Willie Nelson's still alive. Okay. There's a keen interest on these influential people in the genre, in the industry, and more younger people are starting to gravitate
Turn on to it.
toward it. Yeah.
Absolutely. There's a clear parallel between the country and the classic country and classic rock. And it's just that whole vintage thing. Vintage never goes away. Through generations, vintage doesn't go away. So I feel it right now too, even out at Big Valley Jamboree. I get a lot of young people coming up to me for a photo and things like that. And lots of times it's because grandma's a big fan or grandpa's a big fan, but lots of times these kids are drilling back, and I'm singing songs on stage. Even the other night, Saturday we played, I'm doing a lot of the classic songs, and there's 18, 19-year-old kids out there singing along to Marty Robbins and Folsom Prison Blues and songs like that. So the kids are definitely digging this stuff up because it was good. Like the classic rock was so good, classic country was so good. And these are the people, these artists that we're starting to lose now are the ones that not only wrote those great songs and performed them, but they defined the genre. And that's what I always said about the people I got to meet at the Stockyard. These are the guys that created the genre of modern country music coming out of the hillbilly and the out of the Smoky Mountains and things like that transformed country and made it more modern, the Buck Owens and the people like that. So, yeah.
Buck Owens, Roy Clark, and a couple of the best
Roy
guitar
Clark,
players
guy,
ever.
yeah.
Glenn Campbell,
Glenn Campbell, he was the coolest guy. I got to meet him at a country festival up in Grand Prairie, of all places. I just worked a few weeks ago. I did a festival up in Fort St. John with Winona. And 2 years ago, they had Tanya Tucker up there, and I look, and I said earlier, I'm fascinated watching these artists that are, a few steps ahead of me. Anybody in the entertainment or sport business, how they're navigating the aging and the career and all the rest of it. And I couldn't help but wonder, how does it feel being Winona or Tanya Tucker driving up to Fort St. John, performing in front of 1,500 people, 2,500 people, and you've been so high. You've been a big Vegas star at one point. Now at this point, you're correct. But you know what? To see those two artists on stage, that show was as good as they would have delivered if they were at Caesar's Palace in Vegas. I mean, they still clearly were passionate about what they're doing. They weren't doing it just for the paycheck. It didn't look like that. They still were on top of their game, and it was really incredible. I don't know. I guess it's something in us artists that, my mom, before she passed, she used to say, promise me you're going to slow down, promise you're going to retire, promise me this. And I said, Mom, you never hear a golfer say, I only have to golf another, summer and then I can quit. Or a fisherman say, I've only got to fish for 2 more summers and then I can give it up. I can quit. I think same for you being a performer, Terry. It's our passion. And we love doing it, and then we'll do it till we drop dead. I always say I want to drop dead on stage right in the middle of a joke one night, just before I deliver the punchline. I want to say some smart ass thing and then hit the floor with a massive jammer. And people I know, they'll think it's part of the joke, so they won't do anything long enough to just let me go to the light.
You want to go out like Meatloaf almost did at the Jubilee Auditorium.
What happened there? I didn't hear about that.
When he was here performing one night, he collapsed, and everybody figured he was a goner. It wasn't long after that he ended up passing away.
Geez, that kind of reminds me, one year I'm in Vegas at the old Thunderbird Theater. I go to see Freddie Fender. This is in the 70s, before we had him at the club. And curtains open, ladies and gentlemen, Freddie Fender, boom, 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 Freddie Fender. And there's no Freddie Fender. Bands a boom, boom, boom. And finally they boom. Reminded me of Crazy Heart, right? And so finally they stopped playing. Curtains close. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be with you momentarily. Please remain in your seats. Then boom, 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 boom. Ladies and gentlemen, Freddie Fender, curtain opens up. He staggers out there, tries to get through one song. He says, I don't need this shit. And he fell down on the floor. Curtains closed. Boom, boom, boom. Freddie Fender. Ladies and gentlemen, for a full refund, please go to the lobby ticket office. That was the Freddie Fender show.
What, you talked about Winona and Tanya Tucker and going to small town. The old adage is, it doesn't matter if there's 4 people, 440,000 people in the audience.
Absolutely.
You got to perform like you're playing in front of 4 million. And like it's somebody seeing you for the first time. So that impression, you never get that impression, that first impression again.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm very cognizant of the fact that, my fan base, we keep a track on this, and they're dropping at the rate of about 15 a week right now. So I don't know how much longer I've got to entertain. I gotta get some new fans in here.
Hopefully this will help. There's got to be at least a dozen people, or maybe half a dozen, that might click on DannyHooper.com and try and check you out after this.
On the social media, that Danny Hooper Live, I got people following. I got like almost 9,000 followers. I don't know where they think I'm leading, but because I don't know where I'm going, but they seem happy following.
Talking about the artists that you had come into your club, Danny Hooper Stockyard, the people you met on the road, the emceeing and stuff, and over 500 acts introduced at BVJ alone, and being down in Nashville and that sort of thing. Who are the ones that really, really stand out as, like you said, you met Glenn Campbell up in Grand Prairie? Who are the ones that you think, man, that was unbelievable to meet that guy? Or who are you friends do you keep in touch with that are big names?
Well, I wouldn't say I really keep in touch with any of them, but the ones that most influenced my career on the Canadian side, Ian Tyson, no question. When I was a little kid, I wasn't an athlete. I was kind of a geek as a kid. And I remember sitting Thursday nights. I wouldn't miss Thursday night, Ian and Sylvia and the Great Speckled Bird on CBC. And so that's really kind of where I started to get roped in. And he was a huge influence. We had Ian at the Stockyard probably 3 or 4 times. We were very good friends. And shortly before he passed away, I was able to go down to his ranch in Longview and spend a morning with him in his beautiful log home down there that was just like the most unbelievable museum of Native and Western art that you could possibly imagine. We sat at his kitchen table. He passed about 3 months later. So he was a real influence on me. And on the American side, Mel Tillis. I remember being a young kid, Mom and Dad took me to the Jubilee Auditorium to see, it was Mel Tillis and I forget who else was on the bill that night, but him being an entertainer. And he was up there just telling jokes and stories and having people laugh. And he has a real bad stutter, not when he's singing, but to tell stories. And I remember he just so impressed me as an entertainer. And that's kind of what I modeled my career after. I've always been I've been more focused on the entertainment when I'm on stage, making people laugh than I am, on the music.
Mel Tillis is one of those guys that if I likened it to somebody who is current day, like present day, it would probably be Justin Timberlake, somebody who was Justin Timberlake, huge music star.
Yeah, yeah,
He would go on to Saturday Night Live or he would go into movies. He was a very talented guy, go into Saturday Night Live and not be afraid to poke fun at himself.
right.
Mel Tillis was the same kind of thing,
Yes.
almost used the stutter as a tool, as something to get him further into something or as a character. Wasn't he in the Cannonball Run?
I think he was.
He was
Yeah,
in
I
a
think
bunch of
Mel was. Yeah,
movies
he was
back
in
then.
movies and all the rest of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he's the first guy I saw that had you laughing as much as he had you sitting enjoying the music. And I thought, wow, that's pretty potent, pretty powerful.
That is a cool connection for the influence from your point of view too. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really neat.
And it's funny, because I would have been probably 8 years old, 9, 10 years old, maybe when I saw him the first time at the Jubilee.
Mhm.
Yeah, pretty young, so had an impact.
The, radio career, how did that start and or is it over or like because all of a sudden Danny Hooper was on CFCW with Sharon Mallon.
Yeah, Jackie Ray called one day and she said, "Can you come in and fill in?" That's what they told me it was about. And I had done that. Well, it's kind of funny, I don't even know if you know this, Terry, but I had my own show on CFCW prior to working with Sharon. And it was a number of years ago. When we went broke at the Stockyard, I had to pay the bank back a bunch of money or go bankrupt. And I didn't want to go bankrupt. So I got a real estate license. I negotiated a settlement with the bank to pay them back, and a certain amount of that. It was a settlement that we negotiated, or that I negotiated. So I got in the real estate business to pay that off, and I was able to pay them off in 8 months. I was pretty happy with that. But I ended up
Nice.
staying in real estate for about 8.5 years with Remax. So I was, selling real estate, and Al Anderson from CFCW called me one day and he said, "Would you like to come in and do a show in the morning?" It was the 10 o'clock till noon shift. So I had a little show called Danny Hooper, Off the Wall with Danny Hooper. Did not have a clue what I was doing. I was all by myself. I'd never done radio. So that was very short lived. I think it went maybe 6 weeks and it was just horrible. It was terrible. So I got punted from there. But then Jackie Ray called one day and she said, "Can you come fill in, work with Sharon?" Whoever her sidekick was, she needed somebody to come fill in for whatever. So I said, "Yeah." Well, I guess it was what do they call that? A test or check to see how we clicked.
A demo sort of thing.
Demo
yeah.
kind of thing. I didn't know it. But after that show, she said, because I went in and I just both barrels blazing. I had nothing to lose because I wasn't working, I was just in there having fun, being crazy. And but it seemed to work. So they offered me the morning show. And so I thought, well, I didn't know if I could do it because I was busy at that point with the evening events, the auctions and the emceeing and stuff like that. But I gave it a try. And yeah, it turned out to be probably the 7 most enjoyable years of my career that I was on that morning show with Sharon. We had a ton of fun. But as it goes, it was time to move on, and we felt we kind of accomplished what we had set out to accomplish, whatever that was. And I was getting kind of bored. And well, the bigger problem was too, I wasn't getting the time off that I needed to be able to go, to Toronto and do an auction or down to the States. And, I just didn't have the amount of free time,
Well,
off.
you also didn't you have a place out in the Okanagan and you were doing the show from there at some point?
Yeah, I did. I had a home out in Osoyoos, built a house out there. That was pretty cool. And yeah, with the equipment that they gave me and stuff, I was able to do the radio show right from the house out in Osoyoos overlooking the lake, which was nice. And even my mom, who listened to the show every day, she could never tell when I was in town or away. So that technology was pretty cool.
Yet for some reason they can't figure it out for me.
Really?
Yeah.
I can't remember what the box was called, but it was pretty cool. They still make you go in?
I'm in there every morning.
Jeez, man. No. No,
I
you
have a
can do
bunch
that
of-
from the lake.
I know. I have a bunch of shit sitting right in front of me right now. As a matter of fact, I have 2 sets of it. I one over there, one right here, and I got computer screens coming out my ass.
Well, seriously, why do you have to be going into a studio? What's the reasoning?
I could be doing this from Shuswap Lake every day.
Sure you could.
Yeah.
You'd have that nice tan year-round almost.
Look at the boat tan that I got going on here.
Man, yeah.
There's a boat tan happening from the lake.
Uh,
So then the radio stopped, but somewhere in there too, I don't know if it was before, during, or after, you came out with your book, Easy Money.
Yeah, it was. While I was on the radio, I wrote a book called because I had my primary business even at that point, and for many years had been the fundraising auctions. I was doing at one point I think 100 a year during my busiest period, and so I would get these clients call, and you're spending so much time on the phone coaching everybody along and answering the same old questions. What kind of items should we get for the auction? How do we sequence the auction? How do we set up a silent auction? How do we sell tickets? How do we all this stuff? So I just got tired of answering the same old questions. So I gathered all the information that I'd collected over the many years I'd already been in the business. And I wrote a book called Easy Money, How to Generate Record Profits at Your Next Fundraising Auction Event. I don't sell those books. I give them away. And, they're a great calling card for sure. But also, I believe that's just part of my way of giving back. I know how much work that these volunteers go through to organize a fundraising event. And if you don't know what you're doing, without a doubt, you're going to leave some money on the table. Invariably, there's money left on the table, and usually a lot of money. So this book is full of techniques and strategies and everything you need to know to maximize your return of your investment, your return on your investment of your time and your energy getting the event organized. So the book's been very successful. It's been good. It was a bestseller almost right out of the gate.
And you talk about how hard people work for the charity events, the organizations, and the volunteers and everything. As soon as that event is done, they start working on next year's.
Well, and you know it because you do a lot of those events too. Yeah. And, I was seeing too, prior to writing the book, I was seeing situations where you'd have a home run event, say for a Rotary Club one night, and they'd have a huge event. You go in the next year and the wheels have fallen off the wagon and it's terrible. And you're going, what happened? Well, what happened is that the committee changed, and the old committee left. And lots of times what I would see is if they'd had a successful event, lots of times for whatever reason, and I shouldn't have said Rotary, it could have been anybody, the hospital foundations or whatever, they don't transfer that knowledge forward lots of times. And I would see cases where you'd have an event chair that had a really successful event and that person maybe wasn't very likely to share that information. They kind of, for whatever reason, people are people. And so I thought, well, if I create the book, everybody's got the template, how to do it correctly year after year. So that's exactly what's happened. And I've got a lot of clients now. You do so many events too. You've probably got clients, you've been doing the same client over and over for 20 years. And I've got lots of clients now that I've been serving for 20 plus years.
The problem with me is I always thought it was charity events, so you donate your time.
No, you got to read the book. I'll explain to you why you want to hire an auctioneer, hire an expert. And I don't feel guilty about it. I do donate a lot of time, but if I donate my time to an auction, it's usually a new organization that really needs a leg up. That it's got to be a cause that I really believe in and think is really important and somebody that really, really needs the help. When I get the university hospital calling and asking me to, donate, come to a free auction, no, it is a business. And I say to these clients that, because they all say the same thing. They say, well, we're a charity. And I go, well, if you're having an event, you need to stop thinking like a charity and start thinking like a business. Because if you're holding a fundraising event, you're in the business of making money that night. And that's like a Super Bowl event. Lots of these organizations only have one crack at it a year. It's your Super Bowl and you need a good quarterback. And that's who your auctioneer MC is. And I would not still be in the business and still wouldn't be able to charge for what I do if you weren't, providing value.
Right.
I mean, it would have been pretty short-lived.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll just rattle off one perfect example. Okay. Last year, the Clayton Bellamy Foundation, I'm up there. Clayton he asked me if I would come out and be a celebrity golfer out in Bonnyville. And I had some concert tickets to go along with the opportunity to have me on the golf team. You went up there. You did the auction. There was two guys going back and forth bidding on me. And you say, I'll tell you what, let's split it. You each get 9 holes for that money. So instead of raising I think it was $3,500, you got them to both pay $3,500. I scrounged up duplicates of concert tickets. So I went 9 holes with one group, 9 holes with the other group, bing, bang, boom, doubled the money for the charity. What does that end up doing? It just is an extra $3,500 for the Clayton Bellamy Foundation in Bonnyville or the performance center that they were raising money for.
Yeah.
I mean, that's quick thinking, fast, on your feet sort of thing, and genius move.
Well,
right?
Terry, that's just experience too. I've been doing it so many years, and that wasn't the first time I'd done that kind of a thing. That's just one of the techniques and strategies that I use and that a professional fundraising auctioneer uses. A cattle auctioneer or an auto auctioneer or a farm auctioneer or a land auctioneer maybe isn't going to be thinking that way. They come into an event and they say, well, how much is this item for here? Let's see how much is in, let's sell it. And that's all they think about. A fundraising auctioneer walks into a room and says, okay, potentially how much money is in here and what are some of the different ways that we can get it? And that, split bid, which is what I call that technique. That's one. I was just doing an event for the Oilers and Flames that we talked about at the opening there, this Battle of Alberta a couple of days ago. And Thomas McClary, he's the founder of the Commodores with Lionel Richie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
It's 1968. Okay. These two guys are in college down there, and they start a band. By 1972, they're just on top of Motown Records and one of the hottest Motown acts in history. So anyway, Thomas McClary was at the golf tournament, and we auctioned him off to golf with somebody. Who else was at that tournament was Nick Tarnasky. Bang, bang.
Yeah, the hockey player that got into the fight with the guy in Red Deer.
Yeah, we auctioned him. I think somebody paid $10,000 to have him on their team. But anyway, back to Thomas McClary. They wanted me to get a guitar for him to play that I could auction off. So I go to Long McQuay to pick up a $500 guitar, take it down. He plays it that night. And then I start to auction it off. He's going to autograph it. And it's like at $500-$600. So I stopped the auction. I said, you know what, folks? I said, Barb and I will be the first to donate $1,000. We were raising money for the Central Alberta Child Advocacy Center down there. And I said, I'll be the first, along with Barb, to donate $1,000. Whoever cares to join me, why don't we have Thomas sign this guitar, and we collectively as a group will donate it to CAC to hang on the wall there, and we'll have a plaque made. They can put our names on there and say that. So we had 21 people throwing $1,000. So we got 21 grand for that guitar. So it went from 600 to 21 just with that technique,
And that's all in your book, you say?
It's all in the book. All that stuff's in the book, and the book is free. If you want to get a free book, can we tell people how to get a free book? Just can we say that? Okay, just go to DannyHooper.com, and there's a contact form on there, and fill out the contact form and say, please send me some free books. What I do is I ship out 6 free books, and so is that people have them to distribute to their committee, because there's lots of people on the committee, and the book deals with different committee members and positions and roles. So
then you get everybody in the committee thinking the same way.
So then I come in and I say, we're going to do a wild card auction, or we're going to do a super silent auction, or we're going to do a triple up raffle, triple chance raffle. People understand what those terms mean, and they understand the language, and we're all speaking the same language, and they're all excited. They know what a wild card auction is. And that's a simple technique that I developed years and years ago. I used to get people coming up at the end of an auction event, Terry, and they would say, I would have donated something tonight, but nobody asked me. And so I came up with an idea to throw neon colored index cards on every table at the beginning of an event. And from the stage, I say, folks, here's what happens. Lots of times, you may have donated something, but weren't asked. So I'm going to ask you now, if you have a vacation property or a pontoon boat at the lake, you can host a ride around the lake at a barbecue, or a week in your home in Arizona or whatever. And that technique, these cards started, the very, very first night I did that was the Spruce Grove Rotary auction we did. I think it was $46,500. So that's just like picking money up off the floor. The first thing that came in, I remember, was a pig roast for 20 people. Sold that, doubled up on that, and then just got rolling. People were donating these homes in Hawaii and sides of beef cut and wrap for the freezer and all kinds of stuff. So that's just free money. You're just picking money up off the floor. And if you're not doing a wild card auction, that you're missing that opportunity.
Is Ava Barbie's granddaughter or yours?
Yeah, Ava is Barbie's granddaughter. How do you know Ava?
Because I was watching you help her cook steak on YouTube.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's one of the best things came along with Barbie when I married her, is that she's got 5 beautiful grandkids, and they're now 13 to 18, but Ava's a granddaughter. And yeah, now I've got 2 on my side. My son has a little baby boy, and my daughter has a baby boy, and they're all living out at the coast there.
You read cookbooks for pleasure?
I do. If I took you up to the washroom right now, I had a big stack. That's my reading material. But I do. I love cooking. That's one of my real passions, and has been since I was a kid. I started at Klondike days when I was 12 or 13 years old, and worked at Little Acres Barbecue. And I remember, Terry, nobody wants to hear this, but this was happening back then when I was 12 or 13. I had to peel 75 pounds of potatoes and dice 75 pounds of onions every morning, and we're doing it right on the asphalt. I mean, they would clean the asphalt off, hose her down, or chop right on the ground. So all onions and potatoes. And then when I was 15 years old, my uncle, the same uncle that loaned us the money to open the Stockyard, he owned a company called Crown Catering that at the time was very successful in the oil patch. And he shipped me off to Ellesmere Island, the northernmost Canadian island up in the Arctic, right at the very tip of Ellesmere Island. I think we were less than 500 miles from the North Pole. I was a bull cook in a 68-man seismic camp for that whole summer. It was a tent camp, so you're all staying in tents. Remote. Pacific Western Airlines flew us to Cambridge Bay, and then the Twin Otters picked us up and took us up to the northern tip of the Ellesmere Island for 2 whole months. So it was a dry camp, no alcohol, no gambling. Last day of camp manager calls us all in. He's paying cash to everybody. I get 15 $100 bills. That's my summer wages. I'm 15. I'm loaded. It's in my jeans. The Twin Otters take us to Cambridge Bay. Massive snowstorm snows us in for, I think, a couple of days. We can't get out. So these men who I'd been working with all summer said, you want to make some money? And I said, well, how? They said, well, can you play blackjack? Do you know how to play blackjack? I said, no. They said, can you count to 21? And I said, well, of course. So anyway, long story short, they completely wiped me out. They took my entire $1,500 at the little airport in Cambridge Bay. And when we finally flew into Edmonton, the municipal airport, I got off that 737. My mom and dad were there, and I'm bawling my eyes out. I'm 15 years old. I'm crying like a baby. They thought I was just happy to see them. And it's because I got wiped, but that was one of the cheapest lessons I ever learned in my life. Now the only time I go in a casino is if I have to talk to my mom.
Are you carrying on with the YouTube cooking stuff?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, moving forward, I was kind of thinking I was going to wrap up the music here this year, this being the 50th. But we've been so doggone busy. I'm getting booked. I've had a booking come in this morning already for another event with the band, and then we're doing a big harvest ball at the Edmonton Inn for 540 people, October 25th. That's sold out already. So I don't know. I guess I'll probably continue doing some music, but I was thinking I was going to wrap the music up this year and shift full-time. I want to get into comedy and cooking. That's where my areas of focus are going to be in the next chapter here moving forward. So to that end, I'm signed up to go to the Culinary Institute of America in December to go down there for some training in Napa Valley. So I'm excited about that. And comedy, I'm just trying to work on new material, and that drives the MC business and all the rest of it. But the cooking, I've got a YouTube channel called Danny Hooper Edibles, which the granddaughter said I couldn't call it that. And I said, Grandpa knows a little bit about marketing. Grandpa's going to call it that. So we had a lot of people coming to check it out. They don't all stick. They said, well, that's drugs. And I said, well, don't talk to Grandpa about drugs. I've been in the music business my whole life. I know everything there is to know about drugs. So I said, just say no to drugs, especially marijuana. That's a gateway drug. And the problem is you start doing that. Next thing you know, you're doing pot, and then you're doing weed, and then you're doing Mary Jane, and finally ganja. And now your life is out of control. You're swinging a knife at the cop, and she's shooting you 9 times in the chest, and you don't even feel it because you're so high. I said, if you're going to do anything, girls, do cannabis. At least it's safe and it's legal. So stay away from marijuana.
Stay away from the marijuana.
Stay away from the marijuana. Yeah,
call it
exactly.
The marijuana to your grandchildren.
Stay away from the marijuana.
Watch their eyes roll into the back of their heads. You'll be able to hear them back there going clunk, clunk, clunk.
Yeah, but no to the cooking. It's just a passion project. Somebody said, well, how are you making money on that? I'm not. I don't ever plan to. I don't ever need to, It's just I love cooking. I've always loved cooking. And now Barb and I, we travel all around the world. And for years, even before meeting Barb, whenever I traveled, I took cooking classes and cooking lessons. But now I produce videos of the things I've learned to cook. We were in Thailand and Vietnam all winter last year, and Costa Rica the year before that, and Spain and Italy and Portugal. So you can see me cooking in all these places. And the YouTube channel is doing good. I got to get busy and get subscribers. I don't go after that. I just post those things up there, and I haven't been driving them too much, but I'm getting lots of good feedback. The people that are seeing them are enjoying them. So
that's great.
Yeah, it's fun.
I've really enjoyed this, and I know we see each other a fair bit and stuff, and chat and yap and yip and whatever. But sitting down and chatting with you for this past hour has been really fun. Well,
likewise, Terry. I got a lot of respect for you, for anybody who's been in the business as long as we have and stuff. And I think for us to have been in the game as long as we've been in, and Jerry Seinfeld said, if you're 50 years old and you're still in the entertainment business and you're doing good comedy, you're crushing it. So I think that applies to both of us. So I think we're doing a good job. We'll just carry on. But I really respect what you're doing, and I want to thank you for this opportunity. I think this is the first podcast I've been on, so this is kind of cool.
Well, I'll send you the link, and you can put the YouTube link on your website.
Oh, cool.
And you can follow Reluctantly Podcast through your Danny Hooper's Edibles.
Cool.
And
Okay,
then
good.
you can share it on all your socials and everything like that. Who knows? I might have 24 people watch this.
Oh, you got a few. I told you I got like almost 9,000 people following me. I don't know where
Yeah.
they think I'm going, but anyway, here we are.
And you are okay. So Jody's uncle is dating your sister.
Jody's uncle?
My wife's uncle.
Yo,
is
your wife's
dating
uncle is dating whose
your
sister?
Yours.
My sister? Oh, Doug.
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah.
Kelly.
Okay. So yeah, we have talked about that.
Yeah.
Okay,
There you go. That's
I was,
what it was.
I was trying to think for a second. My sister, God, she's a level 2 pole dancer. So I was trying to think, how the hell would he know about my sister? But anyway, yeah. So all those tap dance lessons sure paid off for mom and dad.
Yes, they sure did. All right, man.
Okay, buddy. God bless you.
Reluctantly.
This podcast reluctantly sponsored by homegirls.ca, a top producing team at Remax Professionals, and thompsonmortgages.com. They take care of the financials. You search for your perfect home. If you're searching for a home in the Edmonton area, please use both of these fine sponsors.
Reluctantly.